Good evening, everyone. My name is Alyssa Scarciotti. I'm the Client Education Specialist here with Lexier Dental Group. We appreciate you joining us this evening. We have Dr. Geraldine Alf presenting When Your Practice is Profitable, Everyone Can Win. Go to the next slide, Geraldine.
Yeah, sorry.
Perfect. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Geraldine Alf. She has practiced for 25 years. She ran her own successful cosmetic dental practice. She owned her own practice for 23 years. She stopped after having several back surgeries and decided that she would take her knowledge and experience and transition it over to coaching. She had already done a lot of education and teaching and been a mentor to several other clinicians. So made a lot of sense for her to transition into this role. And, we're certainly in for a treat just with her clinical background, her coaching background. She's very knowledgeable, on both ends of what clinicians experience. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Geraldine to get into our presentation. Throughout the presentation, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to enter them into the chat. We'll either get to them in the middle of the presentation or we can go over that at the end.
Great. Thank you, Alyssa.
Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we're good.
Beautiful. All right. I am so thrilled to be partnering with Lexier Dental Group for our webinar series. Most of you wouldn't know this, but Alyssa and I have known each other for almost 25 years. Sorry to say, but it's true.
Yeah.
We met when I was teaching with PAC Live with David Hornbrook, and Alyssa was working with TechScam, which was one of our sponsors. And the wonderful thing about what I do now is that it allows me to work with friends and companies who share my same values, which you'll soon learn is very important to me. We have a lot to cover, so let's jump right in. Tonight we'll be discussing how to run your practice as a business, including the importance of knowing the 5 most influential KPIs, which stand for Key Performance Indicators, or are sometimes referred to as your metrics. Understanding your overhead. Know how to calculate your break-even point and the costs that contribute to that. Your break-even point is when your costs equal your revenue. So everything that comes in goes out. That's your break-even point. And finally, how to build a win-win-win profit-sharing program, otherwise known as a bonus, that benefits your patients, your practice, and you and your team. It should be an informative and I'm hoping entertaining meeting with time for Q&A at the end. When I started my dental career back in '93, and that's 1993, not 1893. I didn't really think about the importance of running your dental practice as a business. Heck, back then I was just trying to master how to give a perfect block every time. After a couple of years, I bought into a practice and realized I had no idea about the challenges of running a dental practice. Luckily, we started working with a coach early in my career. And from her, I learned business skills, leadership skills, and communication skills. I realized that for me to continue to be able to do the dentistry I loved, I needed to make sure the practice was healthy from a business perspective. I've always believed that when you do the right things for the right reasons, the money follows. That being said, you must know how much money is coming in and how much money is going out on a regular basis. That's what we're going to talk about today. As dental practice owners, you wear 3 hats. Doctor, that's the easy one, in the sense that we got the most training in how to perform this role well. Leader, that is unfortunately one skill set that we were not taught in dental school, at least I wasn't. And CEO. Again, most of us did not receive sufficient training in dental school about how to be the CEO of our small business, because your dental practice is a business. Today, we're going to focus on your role as the CEO of your dental practice business. What's the first step in constructing a house, a high-rise, an office complex, or any other building? You need to make sure you have a strong foundation. Many practice management gurus like Peter Drucker and Tom Peters advocate that a strong office culture is vital if you want to have a successful business. I often say you can have the best systems, protocols, checklists, procedures, technology, and equipment in your office, and it won't move the needle on a consistent basis and in the long run if you don't have a strong culture. Culture starts with the leader and your vision for your practice, and your team is instrumental in protecting your office's culture. Once that's established and protected, we can focus on these 4 pillars that support your practice and your goals. We like to coach and train the team to take ownership of their practice. We work to get everyone rowing in the same direction. If you want your practice to be successful, you must have a team that supports and believes in your vision. Once your vision and culture are firmly established, it's time to focus on the 4 practice pillars. All of these are equally important. When we spend the time to evaluate these areas, we can then dissect them and identify what is lacking or needs attention or a bit more work. If you spend too much time focusing on just 1 or 2 of them, the others suffer. And inevitably, that will start to affect all areas of your practice. So those 4 pillars are finance, systems, people, and marketing. Let me ask you, if you don't spend time on your marketing plan, what are the chances that you'll have a healthy new patient flow? If you don't have a healthy new patient flow, how does that affect your schedule? If you don't consistently have an ideal schedule, how does that affect your finances? And if you aren't bringing in enough money or watching where it goes, how can you afford to hire the best talent? Can you see how all 4 pillars are interdependent? If one of them starts to crack or decay, it will ultimately cause the building to fail. Let's start by talking about the finance pillar. One of the most important areas to focus on in your finance pillar is your overhead. When I'm looking at the health of a dental practice as a business, I look not only at the hard costs the owner has to pay on a monthly or annual basis, but also what do those costs represent as a percentage of their net collections? If you look at this circle as the net collections of the practice, all of those costs added together make up your practice's operating overhead. Those are all the costs that must be paid for you to stay in business. But what's missing from this? I'll give you a moment. The doctor's compensation. Overhead does not include the doctor's salary, distributions, discretionary expenses, etc. That gets paid out of the profit of the practice. So what can happen sometimes? It's the end of the month, and the doctor is the only person not to get paid. If you've been practicing long enough through any of the major financial upheavals that have happened in the past 30 years or so, I'd be willing to bet you were in this position or close to at least once. I'm not too proud to share with you that I know that I was. And it doesn't have to be that way. We want to ensure that our practice is operating as a healthy business. In a healthy dental business, we shoot for the total practice overhead to be no more than 60% of net collections before the doctor pays him or herself. That overhead benchmark used to be 50%, but costs have been creeping up over the past few years, haven't they? Especially when it comes to dental supplies and team costs. So when I can get my practices hovering around 60%, we're all pretty darn happy. What does it mean when your overhead is 60% of your collections? It means that for every dollar you bring in, 60 cents goes right out the door to pay all of these bills that you see. You then have 40 cents left over to pay yourself, invest in the office, pay down debt, etc. Let me make one thing clear. Numbers will tell us if a practice is doing well or not so well, but they never tell the whole story. And we never make decisions based solely on the numbers. That being said, let's dive into the numbers that you want to keep an eye on to ensure your practice is performing as a healthy business. Let's walk through an example using very simple numbers so you can see how we calculate overhead percentages by category and then compare them to the national benchmarks. Let's say your practice took in $100,000 in a month. If your overhead, which is the goal, is at 60% of your collections, that means $60,000 will go right out the door before you pay yourself. If you want to have a healthy business, use these benchmarks as your guide. In this healthy practice example, team costs are 20 to 25,000, which falls within that benchmark of 20 to 25% of your net collections. When we talk about total team costs, that includes salaries, payroll taxes, any benefits, and retirement contributions. If you're spending 6 to 8,000 on your dental supplies, that falls within this benchmark of 6 to 8% of your net collections. If your lab costs are 8 to 10,000 for that month, you can see that that is 8 to 10% of your net collections, which falls within that benchmark range. If you're spending 6 to 8,000 for facility costs, that's 6 to 8% of your net collections, which again is healthy. Your facility costs are going to include your rent or mortgage, building maintenance, CAM charges, utilities, landscaping, snow removal, and janitorial services, for example. And if you're spending 3 to 5,000 on marketing, that's going to also fall within that benchmark of 3 to 5%. Remember, this is an ideal practice. That's why these numbers make sense. Although I think nowadays your marketing percentages can be even a bit lower if you master social media marketing, but that's a discussion for another time. These are the 5 most important and influential KPIs or metrics that we monitor constantly when we're reviewing our clients' practice and loss statements every month. Practice and loss is also called the income statement. We want to be checking the team costs, the facility costs, the lab costs, the dental supply costs, and the marketing costs, and see how they calculate as a percentage of the practice's net collections. There are obviously a number of other costs I didn't include in this example. When we add everything up, this ideal practice's total overhead is $60,000, as we said. If you're collecting $100,000 and your costs are $60,000, that means you have $40,000 left over in profit. You can now pay yourself, pay your owner-related expenses, invest back in the practice, pay down debt, whatever makes sense for you. That's your bottom line. If your overhead percentage is much higher than we would like to see, we rarely recommend slashing costs. To get the percentage to a healthy range, we want to focus on increasing your collections. When you do that, your fixed costs remain stable, but your incoming cash flow is larger, so those percentages shrink. Let's see what that can look like. Let's look at what happens when this same practice has a 10% increase in its collections. So if the previous month they were collecting 100,000, now they're collecting 110,000 in that month. If you work 20 days a month on average, that's only $500 more per day. If you have a 1 doctor, 2 hygienist practice, that's doable, isn't it? Fluoride, FMX, couple more sealants, extra filling or 2, work in an emergency patient, move up a new patient, that's doable. Your total costs remain the same in general. When production increases, usually there is a relative increase in what we call direct costs, like your dental supplies, your lab bills, and your team costs. As your production goes up and down, those costs tend to follow. Think about it. When your production goes up, you're probably using more materials. Your lab bill may go up if you're doing higher production procedures. And at some point, your team costs will most likely increase if you decide that you're going to be adding hours or days. But even with a slight uptick in these areas of direct costs, when you're collecting more, your percentages shrink, especially for your fixed costs. Those are the costs that do not change regardless of your production. So let's look at what that does to the percentages. Team costs are still 20 to 25K. It might be on the higher end of this, but now the percentage shrinks to 18 to 23% versus 20 to 25. Dental supply costs are in the range of 6 to 8,000, and that percentage is now 5 to 7% of your net collections. Lab costs are between 8 and 10,000, and that percentage shifts down to 7 to 9%. Facility costs stay the same. That's a fixed cost. So whatever it was before is going to be the same no matter what your collections do. Adding procedures or hours doesn't affect what you pay in rent. that cost remains the same whether you're seeing patients or not, right? So we know that that is definitely going to shrink. And your marketing is about the same percentage, just a slight improvement. But now, look at what that does to your overhead percentage. If your expenses are now in the range of 60 to 65,000, we're going to take 60,000 divided by 110, and now your overhead is 54%. If you take 65,000 and divide it by 110, your overhead is 59%. Subtract 60,000 from 110 or 65,000 from 110, and that means your profit is now between 45,000 and 50,000. How does that impact your bottom line? That means at the end of the month, you'll have an additional $5,000 to $10,000 of extra profit above your original $40,000. What does that additional cash flow mean to you? You can add equipment, pay down debt, take more CE, reward your team, and you can take home more money. How's that sound? So let's talk about how you can reward your team while still keeping your practice profitable. As Simon Sinek said, always start with why. Why would you want to introduce a bonus system or a profit sharing system? This goes back to whatever your practice's vision and mission are. If your vision is to have a profitable business that is the go-to dental practice in your area, and your mission or your purpose is to provide the best possible care for your patients, isn't it in everyone's best interest to present ideal treatment to your patients and help them say yes to your treatment recommendations? When I was practicing, my team and I 100% believed that it was our responsibility to help our patients say yes to ideal treatment. Because when this happens on a regular basis, it's a win-win-win. The patient wins, she gets a healthy mouth and body and gains confidence. The practice wins, your production and collection numbers are healthy, and as long as you're keeping an eye on your costs, your practice is profitable. The team and the doctor win, you do more of the dentistry you love, and you all share in the profit. And it encourages everyone on the team to focus on growth and constant improvement. I've been calling the bonus system a profit sharing program for years. Why? Because bonus should only be paid out when the practice is showing a profit. For years, I had been told and coached and guided to use some variation of a bonus system that was flawed. No matter who the coach or consultant or mentor was, the almost universal bonus system was based almost exclusively on what the team percentage of overhead was. There were slight variations on this theme, but none of them took into account the overall profitability of the practice. And none of them that I knew set individual goals that must be met for each team member to receive her bonus. So why was this type of bonus system flawed? Well, the bonus number was based almost exclusively on team costs being 20% of net collections. Just to review, team costs include salary, payroll taxes, benefits, and retirement contributions. So once that bonus number was cleared monthly, the bonus system kicked in. But what if all your other costs were spiraling out of control? What if your dental supply costs were 10% that month instead of 6 to 8%? What if you had to buy a new autoclave? What if you pumped up your marketing and that ate up 7% of your net collections instead of 3 to 5%? Can you see that sometimes the team would make bonus even if the doctor didn't enjoy a very good profit that month? That's the first flaw. The second flaw is that it's not uncommon that some team members are just rock stars, always going above and beyond for their patients, their team, and the practice. And there may be one or two others who are doing the bare minimum to hit the office goal, but they're not really owning their position. As long as the bonus number was cleared, the team shared equally in that bonus based on the number of hours they each worked. These were two major concerns that I always had about this type of bonus system. The bonus system I'm going to share with you now corrects for these issues. So what makes it different? There are two goals that must be reached for the individual to receive bonus. The office must clear a net production goal for the team to make bonus. This number is determined based on the overall profitability of the practice. And each individual must hit her personal goal for her to make bonus, even if the office cleared the office goal. This bonus system recognizes and rewards both teamwork and individual accountability and achievement. When you have both of those ingredients, you have the secret sauce of dental practice success. So how does it work? Let me give you an overview of how you can use this system, and then we'll go into detail on each piece. First, you want to determine your break-even point for the previous 3 months. As I said, your break-even point is when your costs equal your revenue. In other words, your break-even point is the number you must collect every month to be able to pay all your regular financial obligations. We're going to use a rolling average of the expenses for the previous 3 months. This takes into account and balances off for very high months or very low months. We're going to use net production instead of collections to determine your office goal number. If we use collections, there is almost always a lag from production to collections unless you are 100% fee-for-service office. And even then, it's almost never 100%. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. And you're going to pay it out bi-weekly. It helps keep the team constantly motivated, and it's relatively easy for you to manage because you just add it as a line item to the team member's payroll check. So how are you going to determine your break-even point? Using your practice and loss statement and your cash flow reports, you're going to be able to determine all of your operating expenses. You get these numbers off of your P&L. Make sure you also include your salary, not distributions, your salary that you pay yourself regularly, and your debt financing, which are your monthly loan payments. These show up on your cash flow statement. Then you're going to take the average of these 3 months worth of expenses to get your average BEP. If you're unfamiliar with how to read your financial reports, I urge you to sit down with your accountant and get a crash course in what shows up where and why they're important to track monthly. I also recommend that you not implement a bonus system until the practice is profitable and until all team costs are hovering around 25%. Why do I say that? If your team costs are closer to 30% of your net collections, you're already paying them well, and or you're not producing and collecting enough, which means it's not the right time to start a bonus program. Let's walk through an example so you can see how this works. How do we calculate break-even point for bonus? Let's say that your total expenses in July were $65,000, in August they were $75,000, and in September they were $70,000. If I add those all up, you're going to get $210,000. Divide that by 3, and your 3-month average is $70,000. Now I'm going to divide that by 4 weeks. So that gives us $17,500 per week for our break-even point. We want to provide a cushion. So I'm going to add 10% to that amount, to the $17,500, in case you have some unexpected expenses and to ensure that you're still profitable. So I take 10% of $17,500, add them together, and I end up with $19,250. Now I'm going to divide $19,250 by my collection rate, whatever yours is. Even in a fee-for-service office, the collection rate is usually a couple of percentage points below 100% when compared to your net production. Think about it. If you offer Care Credit or Lending Club or any other incentives like 5% off for cash payments, 5% off for seniors, 5% off for military, it's going to bump your collection rate down slightly from 100%. If your collection rate is much lower than 95% of your net production, you need to look at how your financial coordinator is doing on collecting payments at the time of service and how your insurance claims are being handled, which is our topic for the next 2 webinars. Now we're going to tell our team that their weekly net production goal for each week this month is $20,052. Now, all of this math is something that you, the owner, calculate at the very beginning of each month using the previous 3 months' reports to determine your average. So it may fluctuate slightly from month to month, hopefully not too much. And then you're going to tell the team what their weekly goal is for that month. They don't see this math, it's for your eyes only. If they ask why that number is what it is, you explain it's based on monthly expenses as well as your collection rate, both of which they have a little bit of a hand in, don't they? If they want to have a lower number to shoot for, everyone can pitch in and ensure that they are being mindful of expenses they have control over, like ordering dental supplies and ensuring there is little to no waste of materials. And your finance team can ensure that they are collecting at the time of service, not billing patients after the fact. Now, let's say the office has a minimum net production bonus goal of $20,052 per week. Once that number is cleared, the team is eligible for bonus. But to give some added incentive, we have 3 tiers of bonus: small, medium, and large. If the office clears $20,052 in a week, each team member is eligible for $20 per person for that week if she also hits her individual goal. If the office clears $22,252 in a week, the bonus amount jumps to the next tier, the medium tier. Now each team member is eligible for $50 for that week if she also hits her individual goal. And if the office clears $24,252 or more in a week, the bonus amount jumps to the final tier, the large tier. Now each team member is eligible to earn $100 per person for that week if she also hits her individual goal. These numbers are arbitrary for the purposes of this example. You're going to need to play around with your own numbers to see what net production numbers will keep your total team costs at or under 25% of your net collections. You want to calculate the number of team members that you have. Assume they will all get bonus, and then calculate what it would cost you to pay $20 per person, $50 per person, and $100 per person per week. For example, if you have 6 team members and they all made the median bonus, that's an additional $300 per week that you'll be paying out. That could be an additional $1,200 for a 4-week month. And don't forget that you pay taxes on that amount, so calculate that too. Add that into your team costs and see what makes sense to offer as your tiers. You're going to want to play around with these numbers to see what's going to work best for you. And like I said, you must have a clear picture of your own financial situation before implementing this. So that's the office goal. Let's talk about the individual goal. Each team member must also hit her own individual goal each week to receive her bonus. For example, let's say the financial coordinator's goal is that she's going to have over-the-counter collections to be at or above 90%. Now, this number will be lower if your practice accepts assignment of benefits from the dental benefits companies, since for those patients, usually you're collecting co-pays at the time of service and waiting to get the checks from those companies. For your scheduling coordinator, her goal could be that she must keep the doctor's schedule booked at or above 95% of your daily goal. And I recommend averaging it for that week, because aren't there days when you just blow the doors out in your production? You started an Invisalign case, or you did a smile makeover, or placed implants, or did a lot of crown and bridge. And then maybe the next day you had lower production because you were delivering a big case. So using the weekly average will balance out for these potential discrepancies in this particular scenario. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still important to shoot to hit or surpass your daily goal every day. But I understand the ins and outs of what a real dental schedule is like. So I'm realistic about this. Your hygienist individual goal could be that her perio percentage is at or above 30% of her total production. If you have a practice that is almost all adults, we want the hygienist production to be driven 30 to 35% of that by perio treatments. The American Periodontal Association has been saying for years that about 70% of the adult population over the age of 30 has some form of perio disease. They're not saying that every adult needs to go through 4 quads of scaling and root planing. But if you take an honest look at what your hygienists are doing every day, I'd be willing to bet they are giving away a ton of their services. What I mean is, if they are doing bloody prophies on more than half of their patients, they are working harder than they need to, and your practice is losing money. You, as the doctor, must determine what is your standard of care for your patients when it comes to hygiene treatment. How many bleeding points or pockets above 4 millimeters or areas of recession constitute some form of periodontal disease that requires some level of periodontal treatment? Again, I'm not saying that all those people need to have 4 quads of scaling and root planing, but I bet there's a good percentage who would qualify to receive a 4346 instead of an 1110 for their treatment. Or maybe they need localized scaling or any adjunctive treatment you provide, like PerioProtect or Atrodox or laser. Once you've determined what your standard of care is, you must share it with your hygiene team and make sure that they are on board. And for your assistant, maybe you want her goal to be to close 1 bleaching case per week, or do 2 to 3 scans per week, whatever makes sense for you based off of the type of dentistry that you want to do more of, the type of patient you want to see more of. And all of these individual goals are based on the vision and mission of your practice. So set your goals accordingly based off of where you are now and where you want to be. So how do we work this individual bonus and why? I recommend, as I said, paying it out biweekly or twice a month, depending upon how you have your payroll set up. Then announce it at your next morning huddle or team meeting. If you have biweekly team meetings, which I encourage if you're not doing this yet, you want to announce who made bonus and how much. Now, let me be clear. This is very unlike having team members know what each other make as an hourly salary. I'm sorry, hourly wage. That needs to be kept confidential. The bonus system is universal in your office. It's a level playing field, and everyone has an equal opportunity to make more money. You're going to monitor whether the office goal was cleared each week, which tier was cleared, in addition to the individual goals for the week. There may be 1 week where the office cleared the medium number, and the next week where the office cleared the large number. In that case, if the individual also hit her own goal each week, she'd get a bonus of $150. She'd get $50 for the medium week. She'd get $100 for the large week. So she'd see an additional $150 in her paycheck as a separate line item for bonus, minus taxes, of course. This can really start to add up over a year's time. If the office consistently clears the large number and the individual hits her weekly goal each week, that's an additional $5,000 each year, assuming that person works 50 weeks in the year. For a dental assistant making $25 an hour and working 36 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, that's an annual salary of $45,000. Earning an additional $5,000 that year is equivalent to an 11% raise. I don't know about you, but I don't think I ever gave an 11% raise in all the years that I practiced. I don't even think I gave a double-digit raise. So this can add up to real money for every single person on your team. Why do I say to announce it in front of others? The reason is it encourages healthy competition. FOMO is a real thing here. It's also going to separate the rock stars from those who are just punching a clock. For those who are just punching a clock, you need to evaluate what they need to do to reach their goals and handle it accordingly. Do you need to train them more? Do you need to give them better support and more resources? I recommend sitting down with them and find out what motivates them. We sometimes forget that not every person is motivated by money. But if you have a team member who is really driven to help others, and that is her higher purpose, then having her understand that when we are getting our patients to say yes to ideal treatment. We are making sure their financial arrangements are reasonable for them, and we are scheduling them and keeping them on the schedule. The patient wins, and then the practice wins, which means your whole entire team wins. For some people, that's more of a motivation for them than the amount of money that they're going to receive. Now, if after going through all of this, you realize that this person is just not choosing to go all in, you may have to expand their occupational horizon, i.e., let them go, and look to replace them with someone who shares your core values and believes in the vision for your practice. Remember, as I said, these are just guidelines. I recommend that you play around with these numbers to see what works best for your practice. Your final break-even point and bonus numbers will be different from the examples I showed you, because they'll be based on your practice's numbers and percentages and vision. Your individual goals will be different for each position as well, based on the makeup of your practice and what your practice's overall goals are. If you want to boost cosmetics, you want to do more Invisalign, you want to improve the number of your Google reviews, you want to improve your hygiene reappointment rates, whatever is most important to you and your team. So let's review what we covered tonight. First, know your numbers. Monitor your 5 KPIs diligently. Those are your team costs, lab costs, dental supply costs, facility costs, and marketing costs. You still need to keep an eye on all your other expenses and watch for any negative trends that may be occurring, because the quicker you spot them, the easier they are to correct. Know your overhead and see where your practice falls compared to those benchmarks that I reviewed with you. If your percentages are much higher than the benchmarks, reevaluate what your production and collection goals are. See if there are areas where you can make changes to decrease expenses. You want to work on making your practice profitable before you implement a bonus system. If you have not been tracking your expenses and how much each area is costing you in overhead, I urge you to run your accounting reports tonight or tomorrow and dive in. Work with your accountant if you need help and guidance. We're going to use the net production number to calculate the office goal number. It's easier to keep track of than collections, and it should be pretty darn close to your collections. You're going to set individual goals based on each position and what's most important for that person to focus on and deliver on a daily basis. And for the individual to earn bonus, she must hit both goals. That encourages individual achievement as well as teamwork, because this truly is a team effort. When the team works together to lower variable expenses, your break-even point will be lower, and therefore the office goal number will be easier to clear. When the team works together to build and maintain an ideal schedule, your production increases, and they'll get a larger bonus. When the individual holds herself accountable to hit her individual goal, she'll receive bonus on a regular basis. The purpose of all of this is to help stabilize your practice. I tell my clients that I want to help them build a team who all share an ownership mentality, who take pride in their contribution, who look to lighten your load, who take responsibility for themselves and their behavior, who go above and beyond, who help you build the practice of your dreams. Because when you stabilize your practice, you regain your freedom. And that's my goal for all of you. Get joy with what we do. What we do is so important, and it is a great honor to be able to provide dental care to our patients. And I want everyone to experience the same level of joy that I was lucky enough to experience when I was practicing. So I hope you found this informative. At the very least, I hope that I've been able to open your eyes a bit so you can see what's possible for you and your team. My company, Get Ahead Coaching and Consulting, offers personal coaching that empowers others. And I have a team of 3 powerhouse women who cumulatively have more than 70 years of dental practice experience in all areas of the practice. Add me in, and together we have over 100 years of dental practice experience with all types of practices. Our goal for our clients is to help them and their teams enjoy their days more and reach their own goals. The side effect is almost always that they also make more money. So please take down my contact information, drop me a note if you're interested in learning how Get Ahead Coaching and Consulting can help you stabilize your practice and regain your freedom. So Alyssa, I'm gonna switch back to you.
Thank you, Geraldine. That was excellent. I just want to remind you all that we are going to be hosting 2 more webinars with Geraldine. We have coming up on October 24th, and then we'll be hosting on I believe it's November 4th. But if you do want to take a look at those, feel free to just scan that QR code, and that's going to go a little bit more into what her second and third webinars will look like with us. And then lastly, go ahead. Do you want to add in anything?
If I can just interject, you know,
Sure.
for that, we are lucky enough that we have Clint Johnson from Profitable PPOs who'll be joining me for the first section of that webinar. So the first webinar that we're going to be doing on that, Clint is going to join us. Clint owns Profitable PPOs, which is an amazing company that will dive into all your numbers. If you're accepting any kind of insurance assignment or you're in network with any of these companies, then it will behoove you. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues that being on this webinar especially is going to open your eyes to the sad reality of how much money you are losing every single day that you're in network with one of these companies. And Clint's company, Profitable PPOs, they do an incredible job of diving into all of your reports. They will create an amazing spreadsheet for you so that if you decide that enough is enough and you are no longer happy with working for those companies, then they will go ahead and review with you, and I can be on that call as well, what your strategy is. Because the reason I hear for most dentists why they will not get out of insurance, and it's not really insurance, we all know that, right? It's a small benefit, teeny tiny benefit, eensy weensy benefit that hasn't changed in 50 years. But we know that when you are in network with those companies, the challenge is that you're afraid to drop them because you're afraid you're going to lose patients. And I'll tell you that you absolutely can lose patients if you don't handle it right. So the purpose of our next series, the 2 parts, is to let you know what you need to be looking at and then give you a game plan so that you can minimize the impact to your practice. So I'm really excited. In case you can't tell, I'm extraordinarily passionate about this. I've been fee for service, like Alyssa had said, for 21 out of the 25 years that I practiced. And I never looked back when I dropped that last company. And I will tell you, there were definitely months where I was thinking, oh God, should I just join up again so I can have more new patients coming in? But I was very clear on the vision for my practice. And I was very clear about what our mission was and the kind of dentistry I wanted to do and the kind of patients I wanted to treat and how I wanted to be able to take care of my team. And the reality is you cannot have a profitable practice in 95% of the cases if you are in network with a bunch of these companies. So sorry, Alyssa, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Just a little passionate about that.
Yeah, so we're definitely excited about those upcoming sessions that we have. We have a couple of questions that have come in on the chat. So one asked if it's possible to get the PowerPoint. I will be sharing the recording with everyone, with attendees. So we'll be sending that over, and then obviously we have Dr. Alf's contact information if you guys have any follow-up questions. There was another question here: what technology do you recommend investing in? So alternatively, what technology helps drive revenue and value for a practice?
That's a great question. It depends somewhat on the type of practice that you have and the type of practice that you want. I am a huge believer in the only time you should be investing in technology is if you can see a real return on your investment. And don't believe what the reps tell you, because I'm sorry, they're usually have no idea. I'm sorry. It's just the reality of it. You need to run your own numbers. Like for instance, it was all the rage a number of years ago that everybody who was doing any kind of crown or bridge got a CEREC or an E4D unit. Well, that really only makes sense when your volume of crowns or onlays in a month is significant enough that you can justify what those ongoing costs are. Because the numbers that the rep gives you are not real numbers. So, that's one thing. The other thing is I believe in investing in technology and outside companies if it means that I can automate something and take it off the shoulders of my team. Because I truly believe that when your team is front facing with your patients, I want them to be doing anything they can to elevate that patient experience. So take away any mundane tasks. Like, I highly recommend, if you don't already have one, you need to have a client relationship management software like Weave or Solution Reach or any of those that allows you to do automated confirmations with your patients. It allows you to stay in constant contact with them. There are a ton of other things that it can do. You can send out your newsletters, your emails, and that is a huge benefit to take that off the shoulders of your admin team. If you still have your admin team calling every single patient to confirm appointments, that is an enormous time suck. The other thing is, if you are in network with insurance companies, one of the other things I recommend is there are a couple of companies that will do all of that processing for you. And it is at a very, very reasonable cost, because I believe that most of them have kind of a set tier. And then it's a percentage of whatever they collect for you. So if they don't collect a lot, you're not paying them a lot. If they collect a lot, yeah, you pay them a lot, but it's probably a lot more than you were doing on your own. And the reason that I recommend partnering with these types of companies, which is all technology, right? It allows you to lower your team costs when you think about this. Doesn't it make more sense to have a company that only does that one thing? If you have a company that processes your claims for you, if you have a company that helps you with your client relationship management, that's the only thing they do. They are just going to be a ton better than anybody you have on your team. And I'm not being critical of your team. It's just that this is all they do. They are the experts. The other great thing is, yes, you put that amount into your team costs. So when we're figuring out all of these numbers, I include those costs when I'm calculating overhead and break-even points for my clients, because it is a team cost. But the great thing is you're not paying payroll taxes on it. You don't have to pay benefits on it. You don't have to worry about someone calling in sick. So those things I think are tremendously important. The other thing that most of my clients are shifting toward, and I think that if you have any kind of a restorative or certainly a clear aligner type of practice, is to get a scanner, because the clients that have had scanners installed, when they are incorporating it into their new patient visit, they are seeing their treatment acceptance go like this, because the patient actually sees. And I don't care what we say, showing a patient her x-rays, A, freaks some people out, and B, they can't read them. I mean, heck, half the dentists I know have trouble reading them, so I don't expect my patient to. But, when we can visualize for that patient, she can start to see what her condition is much better. And then just being able to know, how do I present treatment to this patient? Is she someone that's a big picture person versus a detail person? Is she someone that she only works out of a place of necessity, or is she coming from a place of possibility? But having that intraoral scanner has dramatically improved, for everyone I know, their level of treatment acceptance. So I think that off the top of my head, those are the bigger ones that are available now. All the other obvious ones like digital x-rays, digital photos. I believe that if you can have your hygienist use a laser in your state, I highly recommend getting a laser, because that changes the game on how your patients respond to perio treatment. Even if they can't, I still think that a general practice should have it in the practice, because you can use it for multiple things besides just as part of your perio treatment. You can use it to treat aphthous ulcers or herpes infections. So you can do frenectomies if you want. I never wanted to because I didn't see kids, but but off the top of my head, those are the things that I would recommend. If I think of anything else, I'll pop it out. But
yeah, no, that's excellent. I know that we at Lexia definitely believe strongly in the scanners, and work with our offices to implement that as well. So one other thing, just a question, if you could kind of walk us through what the first year of implementing the system looks like for your offices, some challenges that they run into, where they see the quickest uptick, the easiest acceptance and just kind of bring us through. This is all great information, but what does the first year truly look like?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alyssa. The first year, honestly, the first 6 months suck. I tell
Just get that out there.
leads or new clients at the beginning, I'm like, listen, the first 6 months are painful. There are going to be days you see my name on your calendar for our call and you're going to groan out loud. There are going to be days when you see that I'm coming into the practice to do an in-team training, and no one's going to want to see me. That's just the reality of what happens in this situation. I don't take it personally. I'm not here to be loved. I'm here to get results. And the reality is that when a doctor gets to the point that they realize they need help, we all need help. None of us came out of dental school knowing what I know now. I only developed my education and my level of expertise from taking thousands and thousands of hours and spending thousands and thousands of dollars on my continuing education. And I got to a point in my career where I had mastered the few clinical procedures that I really wanted to know and hone. And all the rest of my CE was about business and leadership and communication. And that's where my coach was so important. And I remember it was 6 months in with my first coach. And I used to have Alyssa knew me back then, so I was still kind of green. But I used to have a real issue with managing my emotional responses. Now I'm Sicilian, so it happens for most Sicilians, if you know any Sicilians. But the reality is that made me a very ineffective leader, because if I had a great day, so did my team. If I had a lousy day, so did my team. I had no poker face. And it wasn't until my coach held up what I call the ugly mirror 6 months in and said, Geraldine, can I be frank with you? And I said, of course. And she said, all the stuff that you're constantly complaining about, you're complaining about your team, you complain about your patients, you complain about your schedule, you complain about what's going on in the office. What's the one constant for you? And I look around and I say, what do you mean? She says, pretend I'm holding up a mirror. This is what we call the ugly mirror. Because until the doctor is willing to take responsibility and accountability for him or herself, it doesn't matter how well your team is doing, because eventually it's not going to work long term. So that's the most challenging part for me. And I've had experiences where at 6 months, we just part ways. It's quite obvious that the doctor isn't ready to make that sort of be 100% vulnerable, realize that I am part of the problem, and what can we do about this? Where sometimes the team is on board, but the doctor isn't. So there has to be complete alignment there. And so what I've found is that the practices who are ready, the doctors who are willing to be vulnerable, who are coachable, who keep an open mind, after that initial 6 months of pain, because there's so much to unpack, right? I tell them, by the time I get in, you've got, I don't know how many months or years of bad habits or behaviors that need to be corrected, systems that haven't been working, but you're just doing them because that's what you've been doing. There's a lot to unravel. And so however long it took you to get where you are, it might take double that time to get rid of that junk and then move you forward. But my experience has been that at that 6 to 12 month period, when my team is really clicking, you get rid of the dead weight. The team that's still there is 100% engaged in the practice. They believe in the vision. They believe in their doctor. They believe in each other. They believe in themselves. And they are willing to do the hard work of all the things that I will share with them, working on both personal development as well as how can I make my practice better from a business perspective and in the care that we deliver. And at that point, that's when the magic starts to happen. And it's usually somewhere between 12 and 18 months that we start to see significant improvements to their numbers. And it's all, like I said, because of what else is happening. When I meet with a new client, I usually get 3 concerns. I'll say, doctor, what's your chief complaint about your practice? 1, my team isn't getting along or they never listen to me. 2, my schedule is a mess. It's either too busy and not profitable, or I have gaps and it's not profitable. And 3, my finances are a mess. And I always say, doctor, the finances, number 3 shows up because 1 and 2 aren't working. When 1 and 2 aren't working, it is going to show up in your finances. And I mentioned that during our seminar, is that they never tell the whole story, but they are a good barometer of what else is going on in the practice. So each office, of course, is individual, but I have found that at that 12 to 18 month mark, that's when I've taken practices where they started with overhead at 82%, and now it's down to 62%. Is that a significant improvement? I've had other practices where their improvement to their collections rate, in one practice, it doubled in a year. There are a number of reasons why that happened, but it is totally doable. Of course, it matters where you start and the amount of work that you're willing to do too, because I can't care more about your practice than you do. But when you care, I am there 110% for you. And the great thing about working with a coach is that I'm your cheerleader sometimes when you need it, and I'll kick you in your butt sometimes when you need it. And I'll hold you accountable. If you tell me that you're going to do something and I set an action item for you and it doesn't get done, you're going to get some sort of message from me, whether it's verbal or written, that, hey, what's going on, Alyssa? You had committed that this was going to get done by this point. What can I do to help? So does that answer your question, Alyssa?
Yeah, it does. So like anything else in life that's really worth doing, you got to put in the work.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
To it. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I don't see any other questions, but certainly you have my contact information. You have Geraldine's contact information. So if you do have any questions after the program, please feel free to reach out. We are asking that you provide feedback to us on the program. So if you could scan this QR code, we are partnering. We appreciate our partner Care First Dental Institute in Texas. We partner with them for a lot of education programs, and they are helping us to provide our CE for this evening. So if you could just take a moment, I'll send this out in the follow-up email as well, but this QR will bring you to your survey for the program. We definitely appreciate your feedback. Any other programs that you'd be interested in seeing with us, please certainly let us know. We're looking to bring programs and education that's of interest to you all. And thank you very much to Dr. Alf for presenting this evening. Very informative as always. And we look forward to seeing you later this month for our additional programs.
Great. Thank you so much, Alyssa. I so appreciate you and your company. And I'm just thrilled to be able to continue this because all this stuff is needed.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much. Everyone enjoy the rest of your evening and we will be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take good care. Bye-bye.